These now give rise to bodhicitta, thinking I will establish all mother sentient beings at the level of perfect enlightenment. To that end, I will listen to this profound teaching and put it into practice. The Dharma that we humbly speak of today is a torch lighting the way to freedom. Complete instructions on the preliminary practices. Sorry, I lost my voice. I hope you can hear me. It's comprised of three main parts: virtuous beginning, middle, and end. We've covered the virtuous beginning and are currently in the virtuous middle, the main body of the text, which is comprised of two main sections: how to follow a spiritual friend, the route of the path, and how in doing so to set out on the path. We've covered the first, how to follow a spiritual path. We're now looking at part 2, how to set out on the path itself. And this is again explained in terms of two main sections: the general preliminary practice for each session, and section 2, the specific preliminary practice for the yogas of the two phases. We've covered the first. Now we come to the second. We are looking at the second. The specific preliminary practice for the yogas of the two phases, which is again explained by means of two subsections. The first of which is the common preliminaries that cultivate the field of one's mind stream with the full practices for turning the mind. This is what we're looking at present. From among the four mind changings, we have covered the reflection on the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages, and are looking at the second, reflecting on death and impermanence. So this, as three sections, is reflecting on the inevitability of death, the uncertainty of when one will die, the fact that when one dies, nothing can help one. Now we're looking at the second, reflecting on the uncertainty of when one will die. This has three subsections. Since one life span is uncertain, and so on. Bottom of page 78. So we've covered the first, and now we come to the second. Since the causes of death are many, and the causes for living are few, there is no certainty when one will die. From among all thoughts, the best of all thoughts is impermanence, just as the biggest of all footprints is the footprint of the elephant. Buddha said this. We think about all sorts of things, right? Have all sorts of thoughts and perceptions and ideas. From among all of them, the best is impermanence, and most of our thoughts probably concern business and our work and this and that. We can also be thinking about the generation and completion phases and different types of practice. But Buddha said from all different thoughts, all the different things that could fill our mind, the best is impermanence. I wonder if I whisper if people can hear like this. I'll try doing like this. It's better. Okay. So when Buddha said the best of all thoughts is impermanence, just like the best of all footprints is elephants, this doesn't refer just to the size, but also to the pattern. An elephant's footprint makes a beautiful kind of 8-petaled pattern because of the pattern of the sole of their foot. So anyway, the point is that the best of all thoughts, the best of all things to have in mind is impermanence. Because if we don't take impermanence to heart, they don't take impermanence to heart, then our mind will never turn to the Dharma, our mind will never stick with the Dharma. And impermanence is taught in so much detail in all the vital instructions, like Longchenpa's trilogy of resting the mind, and so on. It would be really excellent to include some details from that text here, but we don't have time, and I also haven't had time to to look at those texts, also like Jingminingpa's Treasury of Precious Qualities, Longchenpa's Treasury of Wish-fulfilling Qualities, and so on. It would be very beautiful and very helpful and meaningful to explain impermanence by drawing various lines of teaching and points from these other great treatises. But the point is that as the very basis for our practice, the very foundation, we need to have taken the fact of impermanence to heart. With the foundation of impermanence, we can engage in the preliminary practices, the generation stage, completion stage, and so on. And all of those practices will become meaningful and fruitful if we first of all take impermanence to heart. Otherwise, even if we engage in these other practices, the preliminaries, the main practice of generation and completion and so on, they will not be genuine practice. They will just be a kind of play, a superficial appearance. So I said impermanence is what, first of all, helps us. Impermanence is what inspires us to enter the Dharma. Impermanence is what inspires us to enter the door of Dharma. At the outset, in the middle, it spurs us along the path that keeps us going, and in the end, it leads us to the citadel of Dhammakaya. So the thought of impermanence is what inspires us at the outset to actually engage in the Dharma. Engage in the Dharma, into the way of the Dharma. In terms of the foundation of vehicle, that would mean taking one of the personal liberation vows. In terms of entering the path of Bodhisattva, it would be taking the Bodhisattva vow. And in the terms of the Vajrayana path, it would be taking empowerment, receiving tantric empowerment. But the very foundation and root of all of these is impermanence. It's like the basic foundation and ground. The first step of Dharma practice, we could say. If you don't take impermanence to heart, no matter what you do, even if you do a 3-year retreat and lots of other practices, that practice isn't really going to be genuine. It's not going to amount to anything. It'll be no more than a show, and you also won't be diligent in your practice. So that's why I said, in the middle, at the outset, impermanence causes us to enter the path. And then in the meantime, it's like a whip, like when you whip a horse, the horse speeds up, right? So the thought of impermanence keeps us going and spurs us on along the path. So if we can take impermanence to heart, be aware of the fragility of our human life, think, well, I'm alive now, but who knows if I'll still be alive this evening, then that is really going to inspire us and encourage us to practice, to apply ourselves to the Dharma. It will prevent us or save us from falling into procrastination and laziness. And at the very end of the path, if we continue practicing and practicing, training and training, at the end, finally, as a result of impermanence, the help of the thought of impermanence, will arrive at the state of enlightenment, the state of Dhammakaya. As Milarepa said, thinking of impermanence, I took myself to the mountains. Scared of death, I meditated again and again, and now I've arrived at the state of fearlessness, the citadel of fearlessness. So we need this actually, we need to have fear of death. So many of us practicing, but so few of us who are actually really scared of death, genuinely scared of death. So there are plenty of people who have some faith in the Dharma, some faith and interest in the Dharma, and want to practice the Dharma for their own benefit, the benefit of their family, and so on and so forth. But it's very few practitioners who have really taken impermanence to heart and who are really inspired by impermanence and the thought of imminent death. But this is how we should be as a practitioner. We should have taken the fact of impermanence to heart, the thought of our imminent death to heart, and inspired by that, we should apply ourselves diligently to the path, practicing in whatever way we can, generosity, discipline, and so on and so forth. It's said that my teacher Kemadaza Rinpoche would say there are so many great masters who appeared in India and Tibet, but from all of them, there's no one's life story matches that of Milarepa. Even the life stories of all the Indian Mahasiddhas cannot match the life story of Jesun Milarepa. Likewise, there are so many great accomplished masters with miraculous powers and so on in cities who appeared in India and of course Tibet, but none of them match the life story and the accomplishments of Dokyen Siyeshe Dorje, the Tibetan Mahasiddha. He also didn't live very long ago. It's just 2 centuries or so, contemporary with Jigme Lingpa and so on. So we could tell stories about Dokyen Siyeshe Dorje and actually spend the whole day just hearing stories about him. He was just unbelievable. Like I said, even the life stories of the 84 Mahasiddhas of India can't match his life story. Kemadaza Rinpoche would say this. When it comes to the life story, no life stories, even the life stories of the Indian masters, cannot match the life story of Jesun Milarepa. When it comes to accomplishments and cities, then no one matches Dokyen Siyeshe Dorje. So this is... I have a friend in Tibet who used to be a driver in Tibet. And when he was a young man, he had quite an okay education, but he also drank and smoked as he went about his work. And then one day, must have been due to his past karma and aspirations, he encountered Milarepa's life story, and his life was completely turned around. He was transformed. He then devoted his entire life to the Dharma, got ordained, became an excellent monk and an excellent practitioner. So that's just one example. So many people, countless people's lives have been utterly transformed by Jesun Milarepa's life story. So Jesun Milarepa is became this unsurpassable, incredible Lama. And how did he reach that state, the state of Vajradhara, perfect enlightenment? As he said, by reflecting on impermanence again and again, by reflecting on impermanence and death again and again, and inspired by the thought of impermanence, applying himself to practice. And through his diligence inspired by impermanence, then he arrived at the level of perfect realization, the level of Vajradhara. He recognized the nature of mind, gained perfect stability in that recognition through diligent practice, and then perfected his realization, which is to say, attained perfect enlightenment. So masters like Jesun Milarepa, this is how they become accomplished, how they attain enlightenment. And then they, out of their great compassion, they continue to emanate and take birth and emanate in the world out of compassion for sentient beings. They take rebirth intentionally, knowingly, out of the power of their compassion, not out of not under control of karma. It's nothing impressive about taking rebirth due to the force of your karma. So she's talking about AI. These days everyone is kind of amazed by the powers of AI, but really there's nothing to be amazed by. It's just a machine, just an immaterial thing. You feed it information and then it spits out the same information. There's nothing special about that. It's a bit like an illusion, the kind of illusions we read about in the words of the Buddha, the sutras and so on. But it's nothing more than an illusion. Anyway, how did Jetsun Milarepa and so on attain accomplishment? By taking impermanence to heart and inspired by impermanence and imminent death, applying themselves diligently to practice, and thereby attaining realization, perfect realization, arriving at the state of Ashodara, and thereby gaining freedom from the four rivers of suffering, the suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death. So it's important to speak of these things. In the past, there was quite a big difference between, say, the renunciants, the monastics who engaged in formal study, and the lay students were not really engaged in study or formal education. They would just follow the Dharma by means of faith. But these days things are quite different, right? Lay people as well are very well, highly educated in the Dharma as well. So we all need to know that. How do we reach enlightenment? Well, we reach enlightenment by taking impermanence to heart. It's taking impermanence to heart that is what sets us on the path at the very outset. And then as we continue to train on the path, it's the thought of impermanence that keeps us going, like a whip that spurs us on. And it's a continuous reflection on impermanence that eventually leads us to the fruition, to the attainment of the Dhammakaya of enlightenment. So this is taught in the So as we begin moving through the text, we'll see these very same points presented by Jujurumshi in prose, and then with the quotations that he has extracted from the sutras, from Padamba Sangha's teachings and so on, which all speak to the same point. So I'm kind of giving an overview here of the vital points of this reflection on impermanence, and that will be kind of to back up, we can say, our understanding of the text. So that's why I've kind of gone on this tangent, so to speak, before turning to the text. Someone in the past said to me, the Buddha Dhamma is always focused on suffering. The Buddhist tradition always focuses on suffering. You have to think about suffering and death and sickness and so on. Whereas the Christian tradition is focused on happiness. You meditate on happiness, on making offerings to your God and thinking about heaven and so on. So our Christian tradition is a happy tradition, and your Buddhist tradition is a miserable tradition. Someone said that to me. Maybe it's true. We do meditate on impermanence and death and suffering and so on, and cultivate disenchantment. But These reflections are like medicine, right? Sometimes when you take medicine, there are unpleasant side effects like your hair falling out or whatever, if it's cancer treatment and so on. But the medicine, in the end, it helps you, right? There are these minor side effects, but overall, there's a great benefit. In the long term, there's a great benefit. So perhaps we could say it's like that. We talk about attaining enlightenment by the state of enlightenment, which is the victory over the four demons, the four Maras of death, emotions, and so on. So, when one attains enlightenment, one gains victory over the demon of death, the Mara of death, and attains the state of immortality or deathlessness. Only Buddha can attain that state, only the perfectly enlightened ones. You might say, but how is that so? Because Buddha Shakyamuni died in Kushinagar. But that was just a display, an illusory display to instruct disciples. In reality, Buddha, the enlightened state, is beyond death, beyond transference, change, and death. It's beyond change, fluctuation, coming and going. Like if we look at Guru Rinpoche, Guru Rinpoche's life story in the Chronicles of Guru Rinpoche, we see how he departed Tibet, left Tibet in a mass of rainbows and lights, and left Tibet in spite of all the students weeping and begging him to stay. Why did he do that? Not because he was subject to change or death, but to inspire his students with impermanence, right? The point is we need to take impermanence to heart. So, take impermanence to heart in such a way that it inspires us in the Dharma. So when we encounter impermanence in our own life, like our father dies, our mother dies, then we should take the truth of impermanence to heart such that it strengthens our faith in Buddha and his teachings, and apply ourselves to the Dhamma so that when we reach the point of death ourselves, we can die without fear. We can die at ease without fear. That will be the result of taking impermanence to heart, reflecting on impermanence. With this, when we take impermanence to heart and reflect on impermanence, then we will practice well. We'll apply ourselves to the Dhamma, and the result of that will be a peaceful death. So someone I met who was a really learned, excellent monk called Sharabraji. He also served as a professor at Buddhist Institute for 30 or 40 years. Ngondro Rinpoche really praised him, praised his qualities. And he received he was offered a very high salary for his teaching work at the Buddhist Institute in India. A very high salary, and Ngondro Rinpoche told him, no, don't accept that wage. You'll be basically accumulating some negative kind of karmic debt if you accept that wage. So listening to Ngondro Rinpoche's instruction, Ngondro Rinpoche's words, he did exactly that. He didn't accept the salary for himself and offered it all up month after month to the Three Jewels. So it's a really special, exceptional person.
min bumji da tongran ji kashi goya to kashi lakpa to goje na so mi ge meswe ji do ti 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 na ke de ro 다 뺐었더라. जोहोया ठीक हो गया आबादी ज़्यादा है थोड़ा मारना चाहिए स्कूल को सीने या पर सीचे पर तमाम भी मंगोते ज़रूर भी मंगोते हैं तो आबादी मंगोता है लेकिन सीने देने दिक्कत कोरान सेंट्री सेकेंड दिक्कत ठीक तो जिंगी ता निमा जो कोरान पुकुत एक्सीडेंट चेंज जो थोड़ा लोग ये चिकन चिकन पांबा के नहीं करवाता ताकि रोटी को खाता ना डॉक्टर इंजन के ठीक है इसको सामने या बोलता है ना 콘조 밴드 최고제는 나도 게임 많이 도그지 알아래. 샘성부터 오만 비나. 나 콘조 세븐 기리야. 삼부터 차자 꼬라겠지. 나도 콘조 케와 딘저 있는데 뭐니 나도 뭐 배박이 미치게 많이 도그
So, just to summarize, I think I'm just saying this great scholar, Shararati, was serving as a teacher at this Buddhist institute in India. Maybe the institute in Varanasi, I missed the name. For a long time, and anyway, he basically said there are a lot of scholars there who are incredibly, other scholars there who are incredibly skilled in teaching. They can explain pretty much anything really smoothly and eloquently, but when it comes down to it, they haven't really taken what they teach to heart. So compared to such scholars who are very learned on the surface but haven't taken the teachings to heart, and it's actually much more admirable and much better as someone who doesn't have any formal education but just recites, does some simple practice like chants the Mani mantra, but is affected by that, right? Becomes more compassionate, more gentle, and so on. That's a very succinct translation of what the story of Umshita. So the point is that when studying the teachings, by studying the teachings and going through these reflections on impermanence, karmic cause and effect, and so on and so forth, they need to actually have some effect on us. They need to touch us and influence us so that tomorrow in the future, when we encounter difficulties ourselves, like death, loss, grief, an earthquake or some sudden change, that through the power of these reflections and taking them into heart, we're able to actually accept these difficulties, to embrace them and to and not be overwhelmed by suffering, not be overwhelmed like some people are, right? Some people, even though they know the teachings, study the teachings, when something happens in their life, like their child dies or something, they're driven mad by grief, right? So that just shows they haven't taken the teachings to heart.
Ngondro lumba to the English premier get at the Gary or telephone or TV or what didn't get your that's me country kind of Dungal or give it to Snitcher. The continuous.
I met someone in the past who said, come up to say that someone like the Himalayas and people are living very, in material terms, very simple lives, they don't have much money, they don't have fancy houses or anything like that, but they're so happy, they might get some firewood or build a fire and have enough butter and tea leaves and so on to make a pot of tea, and they enjoy that tea so deeply, they're so happy and content with the little that they have. But then you go to a place like England, it sounds like this person was from England, and people are so wealthy. The country itself is so wealthful, people have so much, but all they talk about is what they don't have. They're just plagued by discontent. So what's going on here? And Rishi said basically it's down to one's mindset, isn't it? One's mindset and the Dharma, the influence of the Dharma. So all of us as Tibetans, with Tibetan heritage and ancestry, we're so fortunate to have this positive influence for the Dharma, right? Generation after generation passed down to us by our parents, right? The teachings of Buddha, the basic principles of Buddha Dharma. Avoiding the 10 non-virtues, being kind, content, and so on and so forth. Like if you look at the fires raging in Los Angeles, people's property and lives are being destroyed, but a lot of people are making use of that tragedy to steal others' property and so on. If there's something like that happens in a Tibetan environment, people wouldn't do that, right? They wouldn't do that because the 10 non-virtues and this, the Buddha Dharma is so deeply instilled in our culture and in our minds. So, anyway, the point is, if we don't take the teachings to heart, we don't really take them to heart and apply them to ourselves, then there's no way we can become genuine practitioners. But if we do take them to heart, then we can be transformed, and we can actually reach the point where when we come to die, we can die without anxiety, without suffering, without any angst, and even attain this state of enlightenment. And the point here is that the reflection on impermanence and death is not meant to make us suffer. It's not meant to make us miserable. It's meant to inspire us on the path of practice. As one great master said, if you take just one point of Dharma to heart, like impermanence or karmic cause and effect, or the view of the great perfection, whatever it might be, bodhicitta, what have you, all suffering becomes bliss, all thoughts become Dhammakaya. So really think about this. Even if we just chant a few money mantras endowed with bodhicitta, we will be completely free from suffering. If we do that properly with bodhicitta, we will be completely free of suffering. And that's a sign of genuine progress on the path. So that's more important than accumulating a lot of mantra recitation. Like, that's more important than number. But that said, there is a lot. If we just that said, the mantras themselves have so much blessings that if we just recite them again and again, slowly they will have an effect on our mind and transform our mind. Like Yangtang Rinpoche said, the teachings have so much blessings, like especially some of these teachings of Dushum Tesa, one of the Vajrakalaya cycles and Doji Chopa. But those practicing these teachings, like some people in Sikkim who practice these teachings regularly, do these practices regularly, they don't have any understanding really of what they are chanting. They haven't done any study. But just the words of those liturgies themselves are so blessed that still they have a big benefit on those people, and those people are really transformed by the blessings of those teachings. An understanding of emptiness develops, and compassion develops just by the power of chanting those sacred liturgies or chanting mantras. This is the power of the blessings of the teachings, the words of the teachings as well. And naturally one will become just happy, at ease, without any real suffering in mind, and content. So I'm not saying that I'm like perfectly happy, but that said, I'm not. Not unhappy in any way whatsoever. So it's difficult. We haven't abandoned all the discards and perfected realization yet. But Nevertheless, through our practice, we should still experience signs of progress, right, like this. So now we're on the bottom of page 80. So it says here, what with all the external causes that can injure us, contagious from the elements and so on. The 404 kinds of illness, for example, these include different negative forces and spirits that can affect one. Like these days, a lot of people take their own lives. That's due to the interference of spirits, of negative forces. No one in their right mind would take their own life, no matter how miserable their circumstances, right? There's nothing we cherish more than our own lives. So people taking their own life say that's the illness of negative forces or spirits. And we also have the dangers. Sorry, that was about the above where it says human beings, animals, negative forces. So that was about negative forces and dangers from the elements, fire and so on, like we see in California now with these wildfires raging. Water. Water, precipices and so forth. A lot of people die in floods and tsunami and so on. This happened in Homlar and surrounding areas and in Indonesia, the tsunami and so on. We need to remember these things, actually, remember the danger that these elements pose us, right? As an inspiration or in treatment to practice the Dharma, along with the internal causes that affect the body. So we have natural disasters like earthquakes and so on, like the earthquake several years ago here that claimed more than many thousands of lives. We have tornadoes and so on that can destroy entire cities. And carry buses like many kilometers and flatten buildings to the ground. And there we have the internal causes that affect the body of 404 kinds of illnesses. And these 404 causes of illness are taught in the tantras. We find them enumerated in the tantras, in the medical tantras, also in Longchenpa's Chochu Minsa Guyagaba commentary. He talks about, enumerates different types of illnesses. Physical illnesses. I think physical illnesses, elemental illnesses, adventitious illnesses, and so on. 4 types. There's no one immune to all of these causes and conditions for death, right? High or low, high lamas included, are all subject to death. We can look at like Steve Jobs, for instance. He was one of the richest people in the world, but he fell sick and died at quite a young age. So once you're afflicted by illness, sometimes there is literally no cure. No matter how much money you throw at the problem, there is just no cure. We can never be sure that that things like food, clothes and so on will not serve to cause our death. Or we eat certain food and dress well and so on, thinking that these are actually keeping us healthy. But we really don't know those very same things could actually cause our death. I guess Tibetans think that traditionally think meat, butter, and let's say curd are like the most nourishing foods that can sustain one's life, can sustain one's health. But it seems they don't actually suit everyone, and they can actually make some people sick and serve as causes for death. You just really don't know. Food poisoning. You get food poisoning from these foods and other foods as well. Or just eat something that doesn't suit your constitution. You can get food poisoning from a 5-star hotel. So there can be a problem with the food you eat, like the food itself is poisonous. Or it can be the case that you eat something that just doesn't suit your constitution, causes an allergy, maybe you have an allergic reaction. And eating that food actually kills you. Even medicine is meant to keep us alive, right? To keep us healthy. But for instance, there was a lady overseas who was the Sangyom of a certain Lama, I think perhaps in Taiwan, when she said in Taiwan, anyway, she was unwell and she took a precious pill, one of these famous Ngondro in Tibetan medicine. She took a Ratna sample for her blood pressure. So actually, as a note, these precious pills, Tibetan medicine, we should always be careful to take them separate from other types of medicine. Like if you take one of these precious pills, you should take your other medicine like an hour or so later. You shouldn't take it together with other medicine because there can be some reaction. And actually some very dangerous things can happen. Like this lady took the precious pill and she had a reaction to it. She was rushed to hospital. An hour or two later she was dead. So why? When later they discovered that it was because she'd taken the precious pill but together with some other medicine, and those two medicines were a bad combination. They did something in her body and been a cause for her death. So medicine itself can act as a cause for death. So that's what it says here. Even if we rely on such things as food, clothes and medicine, the hope they'll keep us alive. So these things that usually keep us alive, they themselves can become causes for death. So if you're taking blood pressure medicine, and as Ngondro Rinpoche once told me, it's important to not take precious pills, these Ngondro, together at the same time as your blood pressure medicine. Leave like an hour on either side before you take the precious pill. The evil factors causing death are swirling around me as if I were in the middle of a snowstorm. Like a snowstorm that whips around and extinguishes candle flame. The candle flame of our life force. There's no knowing when I'll die. So we should need to think about impermanence, take it to heart, and then we can become. That reflection will help us become good practitioners. Good practitioners. Kimochi Rinpoche used to say, these days there are so many practitioners who are so keen to attain this and that teaching, and these high profound teachings like the Guyagaba Tantra or other specific teachings. But really, to become a good practitioner, you just need to take one point of Dharma to heart. Just take the reflection on the precious human body to heart. Just take the reflection on impermanence and death or karmic cause and effect to heart. That itself will transform you into a genuine practitioner. Think about impermanence and death. If you really take that to heart, then you're not going to fight with your family. You're not going to waste your time creating disharmony. If you take karmic cause and effect to heart, you're not going to waste your time doing negative deeds. You're not going to create problems in your family and fight with others because you know that's negative karma. You're not going to turn your back on your teacher because you know that's negative karma. So just that reflection on negative karmic cause and effect is going to transform you. Likewise with impermanence and death. Of course, when it comes to teaching and study, then we study. If you're doing formal study, you study all the scriptures, Prajna Paramita and middle way and this and that. But when it comes down to it, just take one point of Dharma to heart, like one of these 4 mind changings of bodhicitta, that will transform your life, transform your being. Failing that, it's possible to do a lot of study and practice and this and that, but if you fail to take any vital points of Dharma to heart, then no transformation will take place. You might have all this pride and conceit, or I'm a Lama, or I'm a scholar, I'm a Kempo, I'm a Chuku, I'm a daughter of a high Lama, I'm a monk, I'm this and that. But how are you leading your life? Actually, your very actions are in discord with the Dharma. So that's the proof of where you're really at, that you're not living in accord with the Dharma. Kimochi Rinpoche would speak like this. And when he would say this, it would really touch one, it would really wake one up. I think, wow, I have received so many teachings, met so many teachers, but look at how I'm living. I'm still not living in accord with the Dharma. I'm still engaged in negative karma. And just like it said, more important than cultivating bodhicitta is to actually give rise to bodhicitta. This means we intentionally meditate on bodhicitta. May I establish all beings at the level of enlightenment and so on. But more important than actively cultivating bodhicitta like that is to actually naturally give rise to bodhicitta, to genuinely feel bodhicitta in your heart. So I hope that distinction comes through in English, to go through the act of intentionally cultivating bodhicitta. More important than that is for bodhicitta to actually dawn within you, even for a moment. But of course, if we don't intentionally cultivate bodhicitta and sort of practice bodhicitta, then it's going to be difficult to arrive at that point where bodhicitta dawns naturally in us. Of course, that's how it goes with practice. The same for generation and completion stage. The most important thing, even if you engage in those more complex practices, generation and completion stage and so on, the most important thing of all is for bodhicitta to dawn within you, to arrive at the point where bodhicitta dawns in you. That's the main point. So Rinpoche is reading through the quotes on page 81.
Luki, Ludi, Yamchung, Vegan, Namchi, Chaneper, Nasaman, Ludi, Yamchung, natural, teachers, against the teacher. Oyoma, Aransi, and Ludi, Yamchung, Ranri, Settlement D, Chui Chu, Chui Boston, Chui Chu, Shinto, Metas, Fox, Penachina, and the Fox, Gator.
The force that keeps us alive is as impermanent as a bubble in a stream. It's as delicate as a dewdrop on the tip of a blade of grass.
Oh, yeah.
So now we're in this third subsection. Life is as delicate as a dewdrop on the tip of a blade of grass. So dew gathers on grass overnight, but in the morning when the sun shines, within the course of a few minutes the dew is evaporated, right? This is what our life is like. It's this fragile, this transient. There are so many causes for dying and so few for staying alive. Our lives are as brief as a flash of lightning in the clouds. So I'm reading through the next quote, next few lines of text. How marvelous to fall asleep and then awake refreshed. A lot of people fall asleep and they die in their sleep, right? Like up in Homla, there was someone we knew who was well, perfectly well in the evening. He had his noodle soup, went to sleep, but he died in his sleep, so he never woke up again. In the past, the Kadampa Geshis, they had the practice of turning their cup upside down at night time. In the past, you would only do that, I think, which is traditionally you'd only turn your cup upside down when you were going away for a long time, or when you're going away for a long time, so aware of the possibility that they could die. Overnight, they would turn their cup upside down and then go to sleep. So all Georgia teaches disciples, like it's taught in the words of my perfect teacher, they would turn their cup upside down at night because they would think, well, who knows if I'll be alive in the morning. Likewise, they wouldn't keep their fire burning overnight because they would think, well, it's a very real possibility that I die in the night and that I'm no longer alive in the morning. So traditionally, if you're living somewhere like in the past, people would, where your main heating source was a fire, you would bury the embers of your fire in ash overnight, right, so that they'd still be warm in the morning. But these Kadampa practitioners, disciples of our teacher, they would not do that because they were so vividly aware of the possibility of death. So they wouldn't keep their fire, their embers burning overnight. And if they were still alive in the morning, then they'd have to go and get some burning embers from someone else to start their fire. Kembachu Rinpoche original monastery. There was an old Lama there. In the 90s. So this was in the 1990s. There was an old Lama there. I was very kind of a young man at the time. And this Lama, old Lama, he was quite wealthy, and he wanted to make a nice hut for himself, a really nice house. So he went on about this, and he did build a nice hut for himself with firm walls, and he was insistent about building this fancy house, and he did it. A few days after he'd built it and moved in, he died. He built such a sturdy house, a house that probably would stay standing for like 2 or 3 generations, but the man himself, the Lama himself, he was dead a few days after that building was complete. So this is how it goes. Our lives are so fragile, we really do not know when we're going to die. And that's how the Kadampas would practice, with such a vivid recollection of impermanence. So it's something of a miracle that one can wake up without dying in one's sleep, and that one does not die in the interval between breathing out and breathing in again. It's just as if one were carrying a guttering lamp on a site blasted by gales. If you're carrying a candle in the wind is going to blow the flame out. There's no knowing from one minute to the next when it will go out. There's no time to take things easy and to think, I'll practice the Dharma later. So rather than putting off until next year, practice this year. So you might think, well, I'm going to practice Dharma, but I'm going to do my retreat next year. I'm going to do my practice next year. I'll do my accumulation later. So you procrastinate and put things off. But there's no time to do that. Of course, if you're old, then there's no time to do that. You don't have much time left. But even if you're young, you never know when you're going to die. So we really should not put things off. Don't think I'll practice the Dharma later. Rather than putting it off until next month, practice this month. And so on. Rather than putting it off until tomorrow or the next day, practice today. So these are the words, the instructions of Gyatso Rinpoche himself. He's saying, do not procrastinate, practice right now. Life is like water poured into one's cupped hands and trickling out between one's fingers. Without one's knowing, it is all run out. You scoop up some water in your hand, and before you've raised your hand, the water's already run out between your fingers. So this is how our life passes. We really do not have much time left, so most of you here, there are some young people here, but most of us, the majority probably in their 40s, 50s or older. Think about it. How have the years passed? How have the 40 years of your life so far passed? They've passed us in the blink of an eye, right? How have you reached this point where you're 40 or 50? But time goes so fast. Without one's knowing, life runs out. As the Master Saraha says,
Ngondro kaya shinsang sana doba zero se 나도 오늘은 그리 나와서 그랬듯이 다시 그 상이 그 너무 오래됐다 상이 그 사원을 이제 하고 말에 해서 ngondro kaya shinsang 남서 세다
So now reading through the quote from the Way of Bodhisattva. Never halting night or day, my life trains constantly away. Second by second, it is running out. Just like water dripping, leaking out of a bucket, drop by drop, our lifespan our lifespan is running out second by second. How can there not be death for such as me? In this Vajrayana we have longevity practices and long life practices, but they can't save us from death. They cannot avert death entirely. Maybe they can help us live a little longer, but they cannot save us from death. So for an accomplished, realized guru, then it's true that such lamas can avert obstacles to their life force, overcome some obstacles to their life force through practice. But so there's a story that Sujam told me once. Sujam's not here today, but anyway. A lama came to see Yangtang Rinpoche and asked him for a mo. Everything's going well for me, I'm doing well, but please do nevertheless do a divination for me and see how my sort of the future is for me. Yangtang Rinpoche did the divination and said, oh, things are not good, things don't look good for you. And said, you need to request this and that puja, this and that ritual to be done to avert your obstacles, because things are really not looking good for you. And this lama was pretty wealthy and he did exactly as Yangtang Rinpoche told him. He invited some lamas to do these rituals and this and that. And then later on, he and his children were driving somewhere, and they had a car accident, a serious car accident, but none of them were harmed. Not a single one died. So that was the benefit, the saving grace of those rituals that he'd had done, following Yangtang Rinpoche's instruction. And Yangtang Rinpoche told him when he did the mo, he said, things are really not looking good for you. You need to have these practices done like right now, like tomorrow. And he did exactly as Yangtang Rinpoche said. If he'd waited a day longer, he wouldn't have had that protection and probably would have died in that accident. So these sorts of protective rituals and practices, they do have power. But that said, we shouldn't rely just on, if you're sick, for instance, you shouldn't rely only on pujas to help you. You also need to take medicine. For instance, we have 404 different types of illness. Some of them are caused by negative forces or spirits. Some of them are physical illnesses. So for illnesses caused by negative forces, then pujas and rituals can help. But if it's an illness caused by with physical causes, then you have to take medicine. No amount of puja is going to help cure you. And then we have illnesses that are caused by adventitious circumstances like accidents, And then we have karmic illnesses. So medicine will not help karmic illnesses. Puja will not help karmic illnesses. To heal your karmic illnesses, you need to purify yourself. So do prostrations, make offerings, go on pilgrimage, and so on. So to purify karmic illnesses, then medicine and pujas done by others will not really help. We need to practice ourselves, purify by means of prostrations and kura and offerings and pilgrimage and so on and so forth. So when you fall sick, you need to what treatment you need depends on what kind of illness it is. Like puja is not always going to help, medicine is not always going to help. It depends on the nature of the illness. In the beginning, when we were young, being immature, we did not practice the Dhamma. We didn't think about the Dhamma. At the end, when we're old, the people might say it's a good time to practice the Dhamma. We'll be physical and mentally depleted, unable to make any progress. Genreza Rinpoche would always say, when it comes to practice, you need to practice when you're young. You need to do it when you're young, because if you wait till when you're old, you might have the wish to practice Dhamma, but your body is too frail. You struggle to sit upright, your body aches, your knees hurt, your spine hurts. You're just not able. So, if you wait until you're old to practice the Dhamma, well, you've waited too long, it's too late. And in the half of our lives in between youth and old age, we're overtaken by sleep. We have 24 hours every day. Maybe 7 or 8 hours of those hours go on sleep. And in this modern world, like if you're overseas, then you spend the majority of your waking hours working. People leave work at 7 or 8 in the morning and spend most of the day working. So think about how your time goes. Even if you think about those of us who get to stay on retreat, well, most people on retreat have to make their own food and so on. And how much time how many hours of the day go on that, making your own food, gathering the firewood, filling the water bowls, making the offerings on the shrine and so on and so forth. How much time is left over for actually the main part of practice, the heart of practice, meditation and so on? Of course, all those things you're doing, making food and gathering wood and so on, are all aspects of practice. They're being done for your practice, but they're not the main heart of the practice, is it? We're left, even on retreat, we're left with a limited time to engage in the heart of practice. And in normal circumstances, of course, so many hours of our day go on speaking to people, doing this and that, chores, and so on. So we therefore have scarcely any opportunity to practice the Dhamma. So develop the certainty that all the tantalizing enjoyments of this life are devoid of essence, like the happiness experienced in a single dream. Think of Los Angeles right at the moment. Millions and millions of property of really famous actors and so on. Kamala Harris, maybe. Even houses, the fancy houses of these sorts of people are being burnt to the ground. We just don't know, right? You might think You might think, well, Rinpoche is so up on current affairs, or like, so why is he paying so much attention to current affairs? But I listen to the BBC every day. It's important, right? It's important that I remain informed, especially when speaking to the younger generation, those who have done their BA and MA and so on, the younger generation. If I'm not informed up on current affairs, then it's difficult to talk with them. But yeah, when it comes to politics on the news, one really can't trust what one hears. Politicians say one thing today and then the next day they say the very opposite. It's all about keeping face, right, for them. You never know with these politicians. So to contradict oneself, to go back on one's words and contradict oneself, Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti, these great masters, said in their treatises that actually this is the worst thing to do, to contradict oneself, to go back on one's words. And this is what politicians do. Sometimes when I criticize politicians, you might think, oh, has a politician kind of done Rinpoche wrong? Has a politician done something to upset Rinpoche? That's not the case at all. It's just look at the way they behave, right? They themselves are rotten. They just do whatever it is to save their own face. And they're constantly dishonest. You might think, oh, when Rinpoche is out of the teaching hall, Rinpoche is just resting in meditation the whole time. But actually I spend a bit of time every day listening to BBC, to Kantipur, the local news, international news and so on. And that's how it goes. So you might think that, oh, Rinpoche, once the teachings are finished, Rinpoche spends the whole day in silence or what have you. But that's not actually the case. So you should know that when it comes to teaching, well, I've been asked to teach this text, so I have no choice to go through it and to explain the instructions that are being given here, explain what's being taught in the text, even if it includes instructions that actually expose my own faults. Khenpo Rinpoche would say this about teaching. He said, when you teach, teachings should expose one's faults, whether they're others' faults or your own. You still need to go ahead and just teach in that way. So Rinpoche is saying, when I'm teaching, often the very faults that the author is pointing out are faults that I myself have. So what to do? But still, it's my responsibility to teach. So now the next reflection on the fact that when one dies, nothing can help one. Even if you're young and good looking and have a perfect physique, that will not help you. You will lose your looks, you'll lose your beauty, your fine physique. Now we're on page 83. Even if you have an enormous, strong body as strong as an elephant, it will not help you. You cannot You cannot beguile the Lord of Death with your good looks. You cannot destroy the Lord of Death with your strength. You cannot make a deal with the Lord of Death like politicians try to do. None of these things will help you at the time of death. Although you may be infinitely knowledgeable and skilled physically and verbally in magic, there are different types of magic or miraculous power. There are magic or miraculous powers that come through the strength of samadhi. There's really nothing special about that. He might be expert in the arts, sciences, in drawing, in illustration, and so on. But none of these will help you at the time of death. No matter how learned or what, you might be a really smooth talker, really learned, what have you, but none of this will help you at the time of death. There's this line of instruction that says, when death arrives, we are all equal. It's really true, right? Whether you be a king or a queen or a beggar, when death arrives, we're all equal. We're all equally subject to death. So one should not be proud about being wealthy or respected or what have you. There's no use in having such pride and conceit. We're all subject to death. No one is immune to death. When we die, our bodies will rot. Our bodies will be burnt. Or like they do in the West, put in a coffin and buried. People in the West, they put corpses in beautiful coffins all dressed up. But then that coffin is buried. What use does it? How does it help to dress the corpse up and put it in this finery? Put it in this fancy coffin. A corpse is a corpse. Then in Tibet, there's a tradition of sky burial. What a wonderful tradition! I'd rather have a sky burial, have the body hacked up and fed to the vultures on the top of a mountain. What's the use of washing a corpse, dressing it up, putting makeup on it, putting it in an expensive box? Well, when it's already dead, it's already a corpse, and then burying it underground where it'll be eaten by bugs. I think, anyway, personally, I think the sky burial tradition is a wonderful tradition. At the least, your corpse then fills the bellies of vultures for a few days. That's something, right? But in any case, after dying, either we'll be burnt or eaten by, just decomposed and eaten by bugs or thrown in water, what have you. What's the use, therefore, since that's our fate, what is the use, therefore, of having accumulated all sorts of negative actions for the sake of this body? People have so much attachment to their body, to their appearance, to making themselves look nice, but none of that's going to help when death arrives. What's the point? What's the point of getting angry when someone criticizes you or insults you? So body and mind, at the point of death, they separate. The mind leaves the body and enters the bardo, the intermediate state. Modern scientists regard body and mind as the same thing. They think mind comes from body, mind comes from matter, and that when body dies, mind also dies. But this is not our understanding. Body and mind are separate, so when the body dies, mind continues. Everyone goes through the bardo after death, whether you be a dog, a horse, a human, whoever. But the duration of the bardo depends on the person's karma and so on. Jimmy Lingpa speaks of this in his texts, and who is a greater authority than him. So mind leaves the body at the point of death and enters the intermediate state, and there are different parts or types of intermediate state. We could say bardo of death, of luminosity, and so on and so forth. But driven by the karma we've accumulated, then we will have a certain experience of the bardo and then take rebirth again in a specific form that will be dictated by the kind of karma we've accumulated. There's this wonderful saying: if you want to know what you did in the past, look at your present situation. If you want to know where you'll end up in the future, look at your present actions. Such a great saying. It really sums it up, right? Logical. This is from Kunjot Sekpa, one of the Buddhist sutras. If you want to know what you did in the past, look at your present situation. If you want to know where you'll end up in the future, look at your present actions. So if you are beautiful or handsome, and you have a handsome voice and so on, karmically this comes as a result from, it's said to come as a result from making offerings to stupas and representations of the Buddha and so on, or praising the Buddha. Likewise, if you naturally smell good and so on, all of these sorts of positive qualities come from such positive karma. So if you've gathered merit and positive karma in the past, the result of that will be a handsome body and good qualities in this life. Like this story in the past, how there was an arhat who needed to cut some fabric. He didn't have any scissors or a knife, and there was a woman then who saw him struggling and said, "Oh, do you not have some scissors? Let me cut that for you." And she offered her knife to help the arhat cut the fabric. The result of that single action, that meritorious action, led her to be rebirth, I think Rinpoche says, as a disciple of Shariputra. So by performing positive karma and merit, upholding discipline and so on, then in your future lives you will gain a good rebirth, a positive rebirth with a sound body, good health and so on. So if one has a short life, is afflicted by illness and so on, well, what's the cause of that? The cause of that is one's negative karma. The source is the negative karma accumulated in one's life. So basically, the situation we find ourselves in is the result of our past karma, whether positive or negative. As Buddha taught in the Ngondro Sekpa, in the future we will take rebirth, and if we've accumulated positive karma in this life, then we will take a positive rebirth. So our understanding is very different from that of modern scientists, right? So in texts like the Ornament to the Middle Way, the commentary on Pramana and so on, past and future lives, the succession of past and future lives and how these things occur is explained in detail. This is not understood at all by modern scientists. I think Rinpoche is saying some modern scientists' understanding might relate or line up with some aspects of Buddha's teachings, so within the framework of this life, but when it comes to death and after death, then modern scientists' beliefs are in complete discord with Buddhist beliefs. So we should be clear on that. Modern scientists wouldn't believe this, but Nepal, in this country, Nepal and Kathmandu Valley, Guru Rinpoche came here. So many great Mahasiddhas have come here and graced this valley with their presence in the past. In 2015, when there was the enormous earthquakes, only 10,000 or so people died, and compared to the damage that scientifically you would think those earthquakes would have, actually very, very few people and very little physical damage was done. So it seems that must be to do with the blessings of the Buddhas, Guru Rinpoche and the other masters that have blessed this valley in the past. Without that, there would have been much, much more damage, much more loss of life. So we believe in past and future lives, right? After we die, our mind will continue, because mind and body are not the same thing. Mind rests in the body in this life, but at the point of death, the body dies, but the mind leaves the body and continues. Modern scientists don't believe this. They don't believe in life after death. But that is not what we believe, right? That said, there are many anecdotes. Many people recall their past lives in a way that just cannot be refuted, cannot be argued with. So there is so much proof actually for past and future lives. Khenpo Ngondro recently wrote a large book proving or gathering together stories of people who remember their past lives. So there was one case of someone, I think Rinpoche said, someone who was the rebirth of a politician or a leader who remembered so many details of his past life, even like government secrets and so on, that no one else could have known. So you cannot deny the veracity of such things, right? And that story was actually printed in the Singapore Times in international papers. So when we die, our body will become a lifeless corpse. our body and mind separate, and this body will be either buried under rubble or under the earth, to perish and be eaten by grubs, worms, and the like, or it will be consigned to the water, to be carried away by a river and eaten by fishes and so forth, or left in a charnel ground to be devoured by vultures and carnivorous beasts, or abandoned to be eaten by dogs and so on. So in the West they have modern crematoriums where bodies are incinerated and reduced to like a pile of ash within a matter of minutes. So this is what will happen to the body. It will be consumed in a fire, our bones reduced to powder. There is no other alternative. What's the use, therefore, of having accumulated all sorts of negative actions for the sake of this body? So thinking, I need fancy clothes for my body, I need fancy food for my body, and with this attachment to the body, then engaging in negative actions and negative deeds, deceiving others, harming others, all for the sake of pampering this body. What is the point of doing that when the body itself is so fragile and is gonna when the body is like this, what is the point of accumulating negative karma for its sake? So people do a lot of negative, dishonest things, right? Like in Taiwan in 1970, I think she said 78 or anyway, a few decades ago, someone was caught out selling oil that was actually extracted from leftover food, and they were selling that as fresh oil. They were caught out and then imprisoned. So why were they doing that? Well, they were doing that because they, out of greed, greed focused on their body, right? They wanted to accumulate body so that they could accumulate money so they could pamper their body, basically, and that's what motivates people to do a lot of dishonest things. But what's the point of doing that? What is the point of all these things for the sake of the body when it will not help us at the moment of death? The fact is that all our deeds and afflictive emotions have been accumulated in dependence, above all, on this body. So why do we think, I need a nice house, I need money in the bank, I need a beautiful wife or a handsome husband, what have you? All of those thoughts are rooted in the body, right? Stem from the body, the fact that we have this body. Well, this person hurt me, they hurt me physically, they hit me, they harmed my possessions. All of those thoughts and all the anger and so on that stems from them, the negative actions that stem from that anger and so on, all of that is rooted in the body. It comes from this body. So, for example, when someone says something unpleasant to us and we get angry, it's only because of this body at which that person utters those words that we get angry. If it were not for the body, the thought, this is my enemy, could never occur. If the sound of the wind or an echo were to swear at us, we would not get angry. This body has made you suffer in the past and in the future too. It will make you accumulate deeds that will result in your being born and dying again and again, just like Chandrakirti says. First we think of I, me, and then of mine. With relation to that, we think of others and theirs. And then we continue like a watermill, turning it around and around with these notions of self and other. To those with compassion for beings, I pay homage. It said, as long as there's grasping at the aggregates, for that long there will be the idea of self. So all of this is rooted in the our self-clinging as well is rooted in the body, right? And as a result, we find ourselves wandering again and again in cyclic existence in the lower realms. Now we dedicate the merit and stop for a break.